Hello and welcome to Lamplighter. Today is June 17. Just as we saw in yesterday's reading, a very interesting prophet with which many of us were already familiar, Jonah and his attempt to flee from God, today we are introduced to yet another prophet. And this is a very unusual story. This is a very unique kind of prophecy handled by God all the way through. And this is the prophecy of Hosea. And the book of Hosea is going to serve as a bit of an allegory. It is a connection not only between Hosea and his adulterous wife, Gomer, but the connection of God and his adulterous wife or nation, Israel. I want us to read very carefully some excerpts from the summary section at the beginning of today's reading, because this really sets the tone for us to understand what we're going to read as we read through the prophet Hosea. On page 758 in the gray section under the prophecies of Hosea, we read these words. After a century and a half as part of a broken kingdom, the people of Israel have not been willing to put away their idols or forget that pagan Baal. If there is anything which especially affronts God, it must surely be the sight of men and women whom he has created, bowing in worship to sticks and stones, which he also created, and therefore which have no intrinsic power. The people of Israel have been as a wife in a covenant relationship with God, and yet their continued idolatry is a constant reminder of their unfaithfulness to the covenant. What covenant is that? It's the covenant that can be traced all the way back to God's promise to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, where he will be their God, they will be his people. But Israel has been unfaithful to this covenant by going after other gods. Each generation has been adulterous in its wickedness and idolatry, and now the time is swiftly approaching when God is going to put Israel away as an adulterous spouse. So God is going to call upon the prophet Hosea to bring his message and his warning through both hard preaching and prophecy, and in another and most unusual way as well. God is going to call upon Hosea to marry a woman whom God knows will be unfaithful to Hosea and bear children of her unfaithfulness. Even the children's names, we will see, serve to be prophecies from God. When Hosea's wife Gomer consorts with other lovers, she only typifies Israel's unfaithfulness in playing the harlot with other gods. And yet, as always, God is going to speak a message of hope through Hosea. Just as Hosea redeems Gomer from literal slavery, God stands ready to redeem his people from sin. And yet, this time, God will not renew his love so easily as he has in the past. This time, Israel will know real suffering and discipline before being restored to God's love and favor. Hosea's prophecies against Israel, to which he sometimes refers as Ephraim, begin with a reference to his own disastrous marriage and the anger and anguish which he himself feels. No message has more impact than one growing out of the messenger's own experience. Perhaps that accounts for the power of Hosea's prophecies. And so the story begins with a preface that kind of gives us the time setting, gives us the idea of who's the king in Israel, who are the kings in Judah during the prophecies of Hosea. Then we're introduced to Hosea's family. When the Lord began to speak through Hosea, the Lord said to him, here's the command of God, go take to yourself an adulterous wife and children of unfaithfulness, because the land is guilty of the vilest adultery in departing from the Lord. So he married Gomer, daughter of Diblaim, and she conceived and bore him a son. Then the Lord said to Hosea, call him, your son, Jezreel, because I will soon punish the house of Jehu for the massacre at Jezreel, and I will put an end to the kingdom of Israel. So a son is born. God says his name is to be Jezreel, and that's a prophecy in and of itself. Gomer conceives again and gives birth to a daughter this time. Then the Lord says to Hosea, call her Lo Ruhamah. And if you look at the footnote here, we're told that Lo Ruhamah means not loved. What a thing to name a child, not loved. But God says, I want you to call her Lo Ruhamah, for I will no longer show love to the house of Israel, that I should at all forgive them. Yet I will show love to the house of Judah, and I will save them by the Lord their God. After she had weaned Lo Ruhamah, Gomer had another son, and the Lord says, call him Lo Ammi. Lo Ammi means, according to the footnote, not my people. God says, call him Lo Ammi, for you are not my people, and I am not your God. This sounds pretty bleak. It sounds as if God has completely given up on the nation of Israel. And just about the time you start to feel that way, we read this section called Hope for the Future. God, still speaking, says, yet the Israelites will be like the sand on the seashore, which cannot be measured or counted. Does that sound familiar? That takes you all the way back to Genesis 12, where God promises Abraham that his descendants will be as numerous as the sand on the seashore. God never forgets his promise. In the place where it was said to them, you are not my people, God says, they will be called sons of the living God. The people of Judah and the people of Israel will be reunited, and they will appoint one leader and will come up out of the land, for great will be the day of Jezreel. Say of your brothers, my people, and of your sisters, my loved one. This is not a permanent arrangement. Then we read a section where Hosea is going to begin talking about his own anger against his wife for being unfaithful to him. And here it gets a little bit confusing. Are we reading about Hosea and Gomer, or are we reading about God and Israel? And the answer to both questions is yes. Let's read some excerpts. Rebuke your mother, rebuke her, for she is not my wife, and I am not her husband. She said, I'll go after my lovers who give me my food and my water, my wool and my linen and my oil and my drink. She will chase after her lovers, but not catch them. She will look for them, but not find them. I will go back. Then she will say, I'll go back to my husband as at first, for then I was better off than now. She has not acknowledged that I was the one who gave her the grain, the new wine and oil, who lavished on her the silver and gold, which they used for Baal. Sounds like God is speaking about Israel. I will punish her for the days she burned incense to the Baals. She decked herself with rings and jewelry and went after her lovers, but me she forgot, declares the Lord. Then we read about God's forgiveness and acceptance. Therefore, I am now going to allure her. God says, I will lead her into the desert. Listen to this. And speak tenderly to her. There I will give her back her vineyards, and I will make the valley of Achor a door of hope. There she will sing as in the days of her youth, as in the day she came up out of Egypt. God clearly talking about Israel here. In that day, declares the Lord, you will call me my husband. You will no longer call me my master. I will betroth you to me forever. I will betroth you in righteousness and justice, in love and compassion. I will betroth you in faithfulness, and you will acknowledge the Lord. I will show my love to the one I called not my loved one. I will say to those called not my people, you are my people, and they will say, you are my God. Then as the story swings back more specifically to Hosea and Gomer, the Lord said to me, go show your love to your wife again, though she's loved by another and is an adulteress. Love her as the Lord loves the Israelites, though they turn to other gods and love the sacred raisin cakes. So Hosea says, I bought her for 15 shekels of silver and about a homer and a lethek of barley. And I told her, you are to live with me many days. You must not be a prostitute or be intimate with any man, and I will live with you. Israel's own redemption by God sounds amazingly similar. For the Israelites will live many days without king or prince, without sacrifice or sacred stones, without ephod or idol. Afterward, the Israelites will return and seek the Lord their God and David their king. They will come trembling to the Lord and to his blessings in the last days. God is fed up with the unfaithfulness of Israel. Hosea is fed up with the unfaithfulness of Gomer. Yet God tells Hosea, buy her back. Give her yet another chance. Show her your love. Because God intends to purchase his people, ultimately with the blood of his own Son, to redeem them as his own, to give them another chance. You and I have been given another chance by the God of creation. By the blood of his Son Jesus, we can be redeemed, and we can live with him faithfully forever. It's a beautiful story. Isn't it great to be a lamplighter? His word is a lamp to our feet and a light to our path. I hope you have a blessed day.